The Florida Keys is a barrier reef. It is basically the third largest in the world, and it stretches from north of Key Largo all the way down to Key West. We have over 500 different species of fish that live in our coral reefs.
They're home to probably as much biodiversity as a tropical rainforest, and home to species we haven't even discovered yet.
And the charge and the energy that it brings to you as you're descending upon these wrecks is just incredible.
It's so interesting, but spooky at the same time, looking at a man-made object underwater.
Educate these divers where when they leave, they have a new sense of why sharks are important and how they can become involved to help protect them.
It was a perfect day. There was zero current. The viz was 200 feet. It was absolutely flat, calm. It just went down without a hitch.
We needed to get ahead of it and rescue some of those corals. Make sure that we protected them, created a bit of a Noah's Ark, if you will, of those corals, because we were watching that disease just burn through our reef.
We want the corals to grow faster, to be more resilient, so we can catch up with the climate change that is ongoing.
I have every confidence that we can buy corals time to persist into the future.
We still have a planet that's tremendously bursting with life, and we still have a chance to maintain that.
Key Largo in the Florida Keys has some of the best diving in the world. Known for its reefs, iconic wrecks, the famous Christ of the Abyss statue, and John Pennycamp Coral Reef State Park, there is something for everyone. First, we start with an amazing story about shipwrecks in Key Largo and the unique purposes they serve.
As you're descending on that cutter or those wrecks, a whole new world opens up. And everything you do, it's the only place that I really enjoy in this world where your cell phone does not work anymore.
It's kind of eerie sometimes, you know, when you get down there and, you know, the viz isn't the greatest, but you get down there and all of a sudden there's this giant boat in front of you. It's awe-inspiring.
It's estimated that there are approximately 1,000 shipwrecks off the Florida Keys.
There is a lot of great wreck diving here in the Florida Keys, from all the way from Key Largo, all the way down to Key West.
Just a few miles off the coast, they're scattered along coral reefs and buried in the Keys' sandy depths and shallows.
You know, it feels like going through like an old ruin, like a Indiana Jones, checking out something new.
If these historical relics could talk, the stories they'd tell and mega mysteries they'd reveal. In another life, what purposes did they serve? How did they come to rest off the Keys? And what can divers and snorkelers expect to see?
The average person, if they want to do it, they can get out there and do it. So you experience all the sea life without having to really kick your fins too much. You can just sort of chill out there and enjoy these wrecks.
And just the other day, we had 15 turtles out on the 2 different wrecks that we saw.
Every time you go on these wrecks, I probably have 40, 50 dives on these wrecks, minimum, if not more. And every time you go down, you experience something new.
These magnificent underwater time capsules offer unparalleled diving experiences, but also serve a huge environmental purpose.
These wrecks that are being placed in places where maybe there wasn't a reef before are able to get some life on them, get some coral, get some fish, get all the really good stuff, and not take away from those natural reefs.
Consider these wrecks almost like condos or apartment buildings, housing sea life when there are no natural coral reefs to call home.
They have crusted in coral. The fish life has used them as their home for many, many years. And so there's teeming with fish and have a lot of history involved with it. So our wrecks that are here are basically bringing in fish and corals, and they're growing on them and and the fish are, multiplying and bringing schools of fish to these wrecks.
They not only house and protect fish, they also serve as protection for humans living near the coast.
The wrecks play a pretty big role as part of the reef protection, as in they grow into the coral and the corals grow around them. But they're a pretty solid structure, so they also help break up the waves and things like that.
Milder storms may actually be beneficial.
Typically, a hurricane is healthy for the coral reef. It stirs up the water, it mixes it up, it brings good nutrients from the depth up to the coral level, to the reef level.
Key Largo shipwrecks serve an important purpose, but way back when, they had other lives, serving our country during difficult times.
So the wreck trek is diving the wrecks of the Keys. So you're going to start up in North Key Largo. You're going to dive the Spiegel. You'll dive the Duane. Hopefully you'll dive the Bib.
It's so interesting, but spooky at the same time, looking at a man-made object underwater, and especially sometimes with the sheer size and shape of it. It's just, it's so cool.
Yeah. So the history of these shallow wrecks is pretty awesome, because they've been down since 1911, 1913, and what they did before they were shipwrecks is pretty amazing as well. You're going to experience many different types of wrecks.
1 mile south of Molasses Reef off Key Largo, the Duane sits in 120 feet of water.
We've been diving on the Duane. I really enjoy the Duane because it actually sits upright and you can experience the ship in its hull.
On a clear day, as you approach the Duane, you can see its intact hull from the surface. 60 feet under the waterline, divers will come across the mast and crow's nest.
When you're at the cranes, it's going to give you a very cool look down onto the well deck. So you can see just the open parts of the ship. You can also turn around, you can see the bow and the stern of the ship. And then you can see the superstructure and the flags just dangling in the water.
Last summer, we dove the Duane, and as we're descending on the deck, there was 3 reef sharks swimming around, and the fish are off to your peripheral, and you're just experiencing, it was like a movie set. And you do this dive, and it just recharges your batteries.
327 feet long, this retired Coast Guard cutter is rich in military history, spanning from World War II to the Vietnam War. Perhaps her most dramatic mission, along with her sister ship, the Spencer, she sank a German U-boat and saved over 300 people. And in 1980, the Duane was an escort ship for thousands of Cuban refugees coming to the U.S. Her last assignments included drug enforcement and search and rescue work. John L. Corey is a U.S. Coast Guard veteran who served in the Marine Safety Office.
I know some of the guys that were on those ships, and it just brings it to life. When we do the Duane and the Bib, it does make me think of these guys. Some of these guys that I served with were still extremely tight.
How often do we as civilians get to see Coast Guard ships? Well, now I can go and swim around one and see all the different rooms.
Another Key Largo wreck, bringing the past back to life, the Spiegel Grove. From 1956 to its decommissioning in 1989, the ship was part of America's Cold War strategy, transporting equipment and troops to Allied governments. Now, she's one of the most popular wrecks to dive.
My #1 favorite spot to take divers to whenever I'm on the Spiegel is the flag.
The color changes are incredible. It's one of the most beautiful wrecks to go and see. There's a resident octopus, which is something that's usually pretty hard to find. And then the nice part is you also get that new biodiversity in a section of the water where you wouldn't necessarily have seen it normally.
The wrecks that are sunk here will attract fish life. And that is what we really want here, not just the wrecks for the divers and snorkelers to see, but also for the fish life to come around, for the divers and snorkelers to see the fish life as well.
Just off Key Largo lie spectacular reefs, teeming with corals and marine life. In recent years, both have been in jeopardy, but there is hope.
The Florida Keys is a barrier reef. It is basically the third largest in the world, and it stretches from north of Key Largo all the way down to Key West. You can literally see a reef and swim 15 feet away and be on a giant coral head and have different types of fish all over the place. So we have a lot of different varieties of reef here in the Florida Keys, soft corals, fans. We are actually putting down more staghorn and elkhorn coral. We're trying to get that to grow back. We have the big barrel sponges. We get off the edge of the reef a little bit, and the diversity of the coral structures is just pretty awesome here.
So they're home to probably as much biodiversity as a tropical rainforest, and home to species we haven't even discovered yet.
And it's that variety of corals that attract a variety of fish.
We have over 500 different species of fish that live in our coral reefs, from little tiny little itty bitty fish down up to the giant Goliath groupers and some of the bigger sharks that come through here on a pretty regular basis.
These reefs have been here for a long time. They've been dove for a long time. They've been visited a long time, so they're starting to show some stress.
If we did nothing to help protect the coral reefs, they would just disappear.
And so if we continue to lose these species, we may lose the cure to a new disease or an existing disease.
But there are protections in place.
The importance of a national marine sanctuary is to help protect our natural resources for generations to come. I want my kids and my grandkids to be able to see these areas and go dive these and snorkel this stuff just as much as I have.
The Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary is one of 15 national marine sanctuary systems located across the country. Here, their mission is to protect the 3,800 square miles of water surrounding the Florida Keys.
The Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary has been involved in an effort to re-examine how we manage this national treasure. And that involves looking at everything we do, including our boundaries, which we are proposing to expand to add additional protections to new areas.
The goal is to give corals a refuge, in particular, the ones who need help.
We do see corals get stressed, especially in the summertime, late summertime, when the water temperatures increase. And that's difficult for the corals. We call it coral bleaching.
Bleached corals are under more stress and subject to a higher rate of mortality. In just 1 year, back in 2005, the U.S. lost half its reefs in the Caribbean due to massive bleaching.
My generation is the one that watched it all degrade. The next generation is the one that needs to fix what we broke.
But the Coral Restoration Foundation refuses to wait for a new generation to come to the rescue.
The Coral Restoration Foundation is doing some coral outplanting of the staghorn and elkhorn corals, which are a pretty important reef structure here in the Keys.
Headquartered in Key Largo, CRF is the largest reef restoration organization in the world. Founded in 2007, when it comes to corals, their mission is to turn the tide. So, how do they do it? Through farming and outplanting staghorn and elkhorn.
We plant them as such that over time they will actually fuse together, or what we call holding hands. So if we plant 10 or 20 together and they have all fused together, those 10 or 20 is now counted as one.
Preserving the reefs off the Florida Keys may seem overwhelming, impossible, but there are ways that you, too, can do your part.
So there are some sunscreen out there that are more of a mineral-based that are actually known to help protect the coral reef. They don't have an oxybenzene in them, which is something that actually does destroy the coral reefs.
And remember, when you're around these precious commodities,
don't stand on the reef, don't touch it, don't pick it up, don't play with it. It's something that we want to basically take only pictures and leave only bubbles.
When it comes to coral conservation, the Florida Keys are considered to be at the forefront. Recently, 600 coral restoration experts gathered in Key Largo for Reef Futures, a global symposium dedicated to saving corals.
When you bring all of these experts together, the atmosphere is incredibly optimistic. And I think that's because we see how much work is happening, how much we're learning, how quickly we're learning it.
The efforts in conservation and certainly restoration were quite impressive in the Florida Keys. Those were the first steps, the first measures being taken already back in the 60s, 70s.
But present day, there's a sense of urgency. It's estimated that we've lost 30 to 50% of Earth's corals. In an unprecedented move, experts worldwide are sharing research and best practices in an attempt to avoid catastrophe. Halfway around the world, in the Indian Ocean, lies the Maldives. 80% of its 1,190 islands are less than 3 feet above sea level. As the Earth warms, rising seas threaten the nation's very existence and the corals protecting it.
Half a degree more, they might get stressed out. 2 degrees more, they're out.
Instead, they're home to countless varieties of sea life and act as barriers to the rising seas.
Coral reefs are really important against beach erosions. We need coral reefs around the islands so the beaches are not eroding.
In an effort to stem the tide, the founder and CEO of luxury resorts such as Soneva Fushi in the Maldives had a vision.
You have to be passionate about a purpose, and for us it was sustainability.
Along with his wife, Ava, the two created a world-class brand of sustainable resorts.
The reason we are here is we were just blown away by the beauty of the environment.
Lush greenery, pristine beaches, and an abundance of sea life serve as inspiration. Let nature take center stage.
So we built around the trees.
Using sustainable, reclaimed, and recycled materials, villas are nature's works of art. Majestic tree trunks serve as columns, driftwood is transformed into furniture, and outdoor bathrooms are the perfect space to commune with nature. But they didn't stop there. A science lab, Aquaterra, was established, attracting some of the world's leading coral experts. And there is only one goal.
It was their intention and their drive to move forward here in the middle of the Indian Ocean on Soneva Fushi to create a science center that is dedicated to the restoration and conservation of corals. We want the corals to grow faster, to be more resilient, so we can catch up with the climate change that is ongoing.
And that's exactly what's taking place in Soneva Fushi's spawning and rearing lab. The first of its kind in the Indian Ocean, the process begins by identifying corals that have survived the stress caused by rising ocean temperatures.
We take corals from the wild, put it in tanks, create perfect conditions, simulate moon and the sun. All the water quality is perfect, so they give off their eggs.
Consider this process the in vitro fertilization for corals.
We take the sperm from one colony and we mix it with eggs from the other, and that creates the next generation.
A generation of supercorals, ones that can hopefully survive global warming and pass their resilience down to their offspring.
We're going to be able to work with colonies that are resistant to conditions that we're going to have in the future with the climate change.
Within one generation of a coral, they will pass on this information in their DNA to the next generation. So what we're interested in is basically the baby corals, the spawn, the gametes, the eggs that are giving off by the corals.
All this is being done in Aquaterra. You might be asking yourself, why not let the corals reproduce in the ocean like they've done for tens of millions of years? The answer is, it's not as easy as you think.
You've got sort of half an hour to 1 hour once a year. They're like pandas, so you have to be in the water exactly when the spawning's happening. Now, if you have big swells and you can't get in the water, you can miss an entire year's worth of research by having to dive.
So by mimicking the ocean in the lab, researchers are able to trick corals into thinking they're in their natural habitat and it's time to spawn.
The corals are growing and we'll be harvesting and now planting these corals pretty soon. The efforts to conserve, protect, and restore the staghorn coral that is very, very iconic for the Keys in Florida at large, have been ongoing for many decades. The Coral Restoration Foundation that is locally there, present, very strong, and all the other institute and associations, they made this place really one of the bigger hubs in the world.
As seas rise, these regenerated reefs could serve as the barrier standing between the ocean and these incredible islands.
It's our survival. Without a healthy, thriving, buoyant reef, there'll be terrible erosion. Our islands will disappear. I'm hopeful that that won't be the case, that there'll have been progress, and I'd hope that we'd be an exception.
Looking at all that's being done offers hope that creating a healthier ocean will be capable of sustaining life. It's up to the marine science community and all of us to turn this dream into a reality.